to cover is Crystal Palace against Fulham. 3 p.m. kickoff at Selhurst Park. Crystal Palace extended their unbeaten run to 3 games after drawing last weekend to Wolves. Could have been 3 straight wins for them, but they had a late Mateta winner chalked off, so sort of finding a bit of form under Glasner. For Fulham, they somehow pulled out a win in Monday night against Brentford with 2 injury time goals from Harry Wilson. And that win worked to move them into the top half of the table. So 2 teams in a sort of bit of confidence after sort of positive results in the last game. So that's something to just keep an eye on. In terms of the injury report, for Palace we have quite a notable injury list, which contains Adam Wharton, Eze, Lerma and Will Hughes now, after he accumulated his 5th league yellow card. So we'll likely get a midfield duo of Kamada and Chikdikore. More on that sort of later, because I think that is an interesting sort of angle to take advantage of. For Fulham, it's much less of a headache for Marco Silva, who only has Sasha Lukic out. So we'll likely see a familiar pairing in the midfield of Andreas Pereira and Sander Berger. We could see Adama Traore reintroduced. He was dropped on Monday for Reece Nelson, but I think this is more of a sort of fixture he can take advantage of, so I wouldn't be surprised to see him back in the starting lineup. So, first angle is to do with, as mentioned, Chikdikore and Daichi Kamada, who are expected to line up in midfield for Palace. I mentioned this last week, that with key players out for Glasner, we can look to take advantage of that. I think we've got 1 or 2 games before one game before the international break, so after that period we won't have this opportunity again. So whilst we do have it, we can take advantage of it. So it's the midfield pairing for Palace that get into a lot of duels. The way they sort of play, they are quite aggressive, and we saw that last game against Wolves. So on screen, here are the stats from the sort of 3 midfielders that featured in that game. So we obviously had Will Hughes start alongside Kamada. Kamada played the full 90, and in that time he had 15 ground duels, winning just 4, 1 aerial duel as well. He had 1 foul, 3 tackles, 3 dribbled passes, so very, very high sort of defensive metrics there. For Will Hughes, he played 80 minutes. He made 2 fouls, 1 tackle, 2 dribbled passes, but he got in 9 ground duels and he won just 1. So those 2 were heavily involved. I did mention last week that obviously Wolves are quite a good matchup for targeting opposition midfield stats because of the way they play. They're quite sort of, they rely on progression through dribbling. They have quite strong carriers in Matheus Cunha, Ryan Nouri, even like Semedo. These are players who sort of take the ball, look to get forward, and in doing so, they're quite adept at drawing fouls and drawing tackles, especially in midfield. Fulham are actually quite a similar matchup in that sense, and I really do like it if Adama starts this. I think they have sort of wingers who look to get on the ball, look to progress the ball through their dribbling. If you think of, obviously Adama is the obvious example, but you've also got like Iwobi, Emil Smith-Rowe. These are all good players that the sort of Crystal Palace midfielders will get in duels with for this game, so I think it's a good matchup for them. Now, obviously, Will Hughes will be out for this game, so you would imagine Kamada starts and plays the full 90 again, most likely alongside Decore, who came on for 10 minutes in that game against Wolves in what was his 3rd appearance of the season. So since he had his Achilles injury, he's been very, very on and off. Game time has been very reduced. And when he returned against Wolves, he looked very, very rusty, I thought, with his challenges. He made 1 foul. He was dribbled past twice, so he attempted 2 tackles, failed both of them, and that's in just a 10-minute spell. 3 ground duels, 0-1. So didn't look at his best, and against the Fulham side, where he might be looking to actually play the full 90 with such few options in midfield, really is one to target for fouls and tackles here, but more for fouls. Based on all of that information, some of the best prices that stand out for this game, we've got Kamada 2 or more fouls at 1.91 with Paddy. a bit too short, I would say. Would ideally like that to be odds against, but we can sort of be a bit creative in terms of adding Fulham players to draw a foul to try and boost that with a correlated stat. However, for Decore, you can get 2 or more fouls at 2.7 with Paddy Power, which I think looks really, really inflated, and I would expect that to drop. His sort of data of himself is not great because he played the full season in the 2022-23 season under Patrick Vieira. Obviously, that's a very different style to what he'll be asked to do under Glasner. He's only played, I think, the equivalent of 90 minutes over the last 2 seasons, so not much to go for him. But just based on the eye test of how he played against Wolves, looked very rusty, looked very rushed in his play. And I think against a Fulham side, he will struggle, especially if he has to play sort of 90 minutes. So 2.7 for 2 or more fouls, with ladder potential, I would say. For Kamada, you can get 3 or more tackles at 1.85 with William Hill, which again, I think is a really nice price. Because he made 3 out of 6 tackles last game against Wolves. And again, I would imagine he plays the full 90 in a decent matchup. He's also 8.5 with 365 to be carded, which I think is a massive, massive price. Most sort of other books have got him around sort of the 3-1 sort of price. I would expect him to shorten a bit. But just on the surface, that sort of 7-1 for him to be carded is pretty big. Moving on to a second angle is a sort of familiar one if you watched the stream last week. It's for Nketiah to register a shot on target and have 2 or more shots. So as predicted, he did shift into the Eze role, and he will likely do that again with Eze still out, which naturally makes him a target for shots. Nketiah himself is more of sort of a shoot first player. He's quite selfish in his play, again, which is a good thing for backing him for this kind of stuff. And he landed this selection last week, so that's sort of a good sign. He comes out at 1.75 with Bet365 for him to have 2 or more shots with 1 on target. I think Fulham are a good matchup away. Fulham at home are obviously quite a different side to how they perform away. They're a lot more solid at home compared to away. So I don't mind backing sort of opposition shots for Crystal Palace in this game. And yeah, Nketiah is the one that stands out. One thing I did mention is how the loss of Eze would impact the sort of forward line for Palace. I said it would have a negative impact on Mateta, but a positive impact on Nketiah. We didn't really see that too much against Wolves. I thought Nketiah was quite quiet. But one thing that did sort of change was how Mateta sort of approached his play. We saw him more focused on sort of dropping deeper, actually. And he sort of caught the eye for his strength. He was very hard to dispossess, and he sort of utilised that to create some really high quality chances for his side. Now the focus here is for him to actually draw a foul, which he didn't manage to do against Wolves, but I think it was notable how much more he saw the ball, especially in sort of midfield areas, sort of dropping in between the lines, and we didn't really see him do that much at the start of the season when Eze was around. And I think that makes sense. If you think about replacing Eze with a player like Nketiah, you're not going to get quite the same chance creation, and I think Mateta sort of resorted to try and creating his own chances, which we saw against Wolves. He's currently priced at 1.62 to draw a foul with Sky, which has landed in just 5 out of 13 games so far, so it is sort of more of a rogue selection. But if we can get this sort of around 1 sort of evens or so when more books open up, I haven't yet checked every single book for this market, but if we can get sort of evens price, I think that is really nice, just based on how you sort of approach that game against Wolves. Kamada 3+ tackles 2.2 with Sky. Yeah, really like that price. I think when I checked this last night, Sky hadn't released their markets. So I haven't had the opportunity to check today, but 2.2 is a very good price, and I would sort of expect it to shorten to around evens or 1.83, that kind of price. But yeah, thank you for that. And I think there's good potential for ladders there, actually, especially if he has to play the 90, which I think is likely. So I think the first game, Palace against Fulham, has quite a lot of potential, actually. Really liking the matchup. Moving on to